Elections are something millions of Americans participate in, but most of us probably don't spend much time thinking about what happens behind the scenes. In this special From the Archives edition of Problem Solved, we're going back to October 2024, just days before a presidential election, when IISE's David Brandt spoke with Dr. Gretchen Macht, director of the Engineering for Democracy Institute at the University of Rhode Island. But this conversation isn't about candidates or politics. It's about the process and the industrial and systems engineering required to make one of the country's largest and most complex operations work. Enjoy this From the Archives edition of Problem Solved.
As this episode premieres, we're just 1 week away from the 2024 elections in the United States. After several months of political twists and turns, campaign ads, and text messages, Americans will exercise their right to vote with the eyes of the world watching this consequential contest play out. 4 years ago, the election was carried out under unique and risky circumstances amid the COVID-19 pandemic, yet Americans showed up in record turnout in many states and voting precincts across the country, numbers that are predicted to be outpaced this time around. With early and mail-in voting underway, and an anticipated crowd of in-person voters topping it all off November 5th, how are election officials managing the ballot traffic while executing a free and fair election process? Joining Problem Solved again 4 years later to explain it all is Gretchen Macht, an associate professor in the Department of Mechanical, Industrial, and Systems Engineering at the University of Rhode Island. Dr. Macht is a computational community ergonomist in the environment of public service and government, and the director of the Engineering for Democracy Institute, previously known as URI Votes. The Engineering for Democracy Institute is a one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art, one-stop shop for election officials to get support for their uniquely complex election issues through applied engineering solutions. Using engineering principles including simulation, optimization, advanced statistical analyses, and facility planning and layout, the Institute has created tools and guidelines, helped implement legislative changes, and addressed current election challenges. In this interview, she discusses how her team engages with county election officials from different parts of the U.S., the lessons learned from 4 years ago and how they're being applied now, and what you should know about the process in real time as American voters and the world wait for the results. Gretchen, welcome back to the podcast. We have not seen you since 2020, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how things are going in 2024.
Well, thank you so much, David, for having me back. It's a privilege to be back and to have these discussions and to help kind of make sense of some of the things that are happening in the universe right now in elections. And if I can help any of the audience understand a little bit more from a process-oriented perspective, I'm more than happy to do so.
That's something that's going to be really eye-opening, I think, for our listeners, whether they're engineers or otherwise, simply because until we started talking 4 years ago, I honestly didn't really know much about the actual process. I knew what I had to do as a voter. I didn't really know what happens, say, after the election's done and how that whole process works. And obviously, if you pay any attention at all to news, certainly that was a focus after 2020. And surely it's something that'll be brought up again after this cycle. But we'll try to steer clear of the politics of that, but really keep it focused on the process because that's really what our listeners are most interested in. Tell me a little bit about the Engineering for Democracy Institute, which is your team that focuses on the success of executing in-person voting.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to have this conversation from a process-oriented perspective. So a little bit about us is we did really start in 2017 as Rhode Island Votes, so Voter Operations and Election Systems Project. And that started as a Kaizen challenge that happened after the 2016 election. The Secretary of State's office in Rhode Island partnered with the Rhode Island Board of Elections, and they were trying to figure out ways to problem solve for future elections. So we got tied into that. We were specifically tied into three very different aspects of how we can help make the process more effective and efficient. And I thought we were done. That didn't happen, and we continued to grow. And then we turned into the University of Rhode Island voter operations and election system. So URI votes, which has been confused a lot as some sort of like voter advocacy or getting the youth vote and those types of things.
Sure.
The O was for operations. So we were getting a lot of struggles with that, just from a marketing and PR perspective. And then we chatted in 2020 about how all of the different requirements and all of the different challenges that the pandemic had presented caused a lot of ripple effects through all different facets of our lives. And elections was no different. And those challenges played itself out, right? And we've seen that. And what we have found out that each election cycle has its own patterns, right? And those patterns aren't necessarily going to be the next thing or the next challenge for the next cycle. And it doesn't matter if it's the midterm cycle, which is, in between every 2 years in between the presidential or every presidential.
Right.
So what we found out was that this doesn't stop in between the presidential election. This doesn't stop in between midterm elections. And that this process of continuous improvement and planning and budgets and laws and the ever-changing landscape in terms of laws and regulations across all of the 50 states and U.S. territories constantly changes the game, right? It changes the game in terms of limitations and constraints, the objective functions that you're allowed to execute, who can help for certain situations, et cetera. So what we thought would kind of level itself after 2020 actually continued to grow. So therefore, we decided as the university in a conversation with the powers that be that maybe we should turn ourselves into an institute, collaborate with other universities, collaborate with other colleges within our university, and really create this one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art, kind of a one-stop shop for local election officials to get support for their complex election issues or challenges, if you will, through applied engineering solutions. So how can we provide information through data so that election officials can make then data-informed decision? And how can that then support election infrastructure? How can it support them in some of the things that they have to do? And we know that elections in most government situations are resource constrained. So how can we do more with less? And I'll quote Tammy Patrick, who's the director of the Election Center, by saying, if you think of elections, right, you want them fast, you want them accurate, you want them cheap, right? You don't want to pay a whole lot, right? But the final part of that quote is, yep, pick two. You can have fast and cheap, but you're not going to have accurate. And you want to have accurate because you want the election results to reflect the actual will of the voters, right? So accurate has to be there. So if it's going to be fast, it's not going to be cheap. And if it's accurate and cheap, then you're definitely not going to have the answer on election day when everybody wants it, right?
Right.
So it's those different types of things. So we deal with processes that are before the elections. We deal with processes that happen on election day, and we deal with processes that happen after election day, which maybe don't get as much coverage in the news. But there's a lot of different processes that happen to get to the end goal, right? Which is the total tabulation of the votes for all of the different questions on a ballot.
How many team members do you have working with you, and what's the scope of what you're working on in this 2024 cycle?
Sure. Well, thank you for asking that, because a lot of times when I chat with people about the work that we do here at the Engineering for Democracy Institute, I always use we, and it's because it's very much a collaborative environment. We work together. I do not problem solve every single answer. We work as the unit. I have teams that work on specific types of projects, so vote by mail, or I have teams that are working on warehouse design, or I have teams that look at in-person voting. Regardless, to answer your question more directly, I have 2 full-time staff. I have 1 PhD student. I have 3 master's students, and I have, at least for now, 1 undergraduate. We're currently actively recruiting on that. So my team is 8, and it's great. They're amazing. We have great conversations. We brainstorm a lot of different solutions. We come with different perspectives. We have different states represented just within our group, let alone different countries. And we are able to think about things in a collaborative and holistic environment to help with some of these solutions, because some of the questions that we get asked by election directors or administrators or officials depending on their title, which can also be county clerk. There's lots of titles, right? But local election officials, when we talk to them, some of it's creating new math, or some of it's creating adaptations of really old math. Like the one research project we're working on right now is looking at papers from the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
So, right? Pre-record keeping volumes of paper instead of computers and backup. So just a lot of different nuances to different projects. But you did ask about projects. And sometimes we do multiple projects with a particular county or state, or sometimes we do one thing and that's what they need, and we move on to a different project. Or sometimes we solve the challenge with that particular community and they're like, can we ask you this question? And then we dive into more. So the way that I like to think about it is our impact, right? Overall, the Engineering for Democracy Institute has impacted over 26 million registered voters since our inception. And in this year alone, we have helped roughly 9.6 million registered voters.
Wow. All right.
And that is across 11 states. So this year we have worked with Oregon, Wisconsin, Rhode Island, obviously,
Sure.
California, Georgia, Oregon, Colorado. So there's quite a few opportunities, and those are the ones that I can think of right offhand. We have other opportunities just in the next 2 weeks to potentially expand upon that, depending on where various election administrators are in their very specific processes and if they need support. Or sometimes at this point in this election cycle, it's, hey, come and do some time studies here. We want to know how long this is going to take. And we're like, oh, yeah, sure. We can sit here for 12 hours and figure out how long this is and what the distribution looks like. And that's great. So it's kind of a variation in between. So I hope that captures the scale.
It absolutely does. And I have to say, my past life as a newspaper journalist, the radar went off because in your list of states, you mentioned a couple of swing states. So now again,
Yes.
not to bring politics into it, but I couldn't help but notice.
Right. And for us, though, it's not about that.
Right.
It's about, we have an election administrator with a particular challenge.
Absolutely.
And when we look at the numbers, right, we have a high turnover rate in election officials. We have people that this will be up to a third, if not more, of election administration. This will be their first presidential election.
Wow. Okay.
They've been in the job for less than 2 years, maybe 18 months.
Right.
They have a few local elections, maybe a state, maybe a primary, but this is the big game, right? This is what everybody's paying attention to. So they know their system. They just want to make one tweak to it. And does that actually make it better? We know that sometimes in engineering, especially industrial engineering, that if we make one decision and we don't balance the whole system, that it can really just have a ripple effect throughout all of it. So when they're asking us those types of questions, and we're trying to simulate the response, or we're creating a genetic algorithm that can help sort between some of their challenges, or even just a good old-fashioned linear program, it's those types of things that they ask us. And yeah, it's not about swing state versus not. It's not that those people in those states get priority. Everybody gets their questions answered. It's just their questions take different amount of time because they're different types of questions with different constraints. So yeah, we do talk to certain states that have, certain ramifications in the electoral college and or, turnout and et cetera. But that's not what we focus on as engineers. That's why I also work with political scientists who help me understand some of the arena in which we play in and support us in that in our collaboration. So yes, but also no.
Given the obvious value and importance of elections in general in the U.S. or elsewhere, part of me has this really funny, cartoonish vision of you and your team like a jet on standby, ready to fly in and fix whatever needs to be fixed in voting at any location across the U.S. Now,
we're way scrappier than that. Let's be very clear.
No, I figured it was a lean operation, hence the profession. But I have to wonder, though, What is that process like? Who comes to who? Do you reach out? Does a precinct or a local official reach out? Talk to me a little bit about that process. How do you get involved? How does that work?
So most of the time it's by word of mouth, or we're at a conference and we're presenting at the Election Center conference, or we're presenting at the Election Science Reform and Administration Conference. And we are out there, we're talking about the work that we're actively doing, and then people hear about it. One of our current collaborators, we met, I want to say in the beginning of 2023, and they saw our presentation and they came up to us and were like, can you make a simulation that looks like that for my county? And we're like, I think so. It depends on your problem. What is it like in your county? What does that look like? And so we did. And it was because they have a vote center model where they're located, and they were currently spending funds to open up a vote center across the street because they didn't think that in their current facility that they could set one up in their entryway and or their specific space for when they process all other sorts of things that a clerk does.
Right.
So we said, well, we can look into that. And they're like, well, yeah, come on over. So we did hop on a plane. We did pay for it. We don't have one just on the tarmac.
I was right.
Even though we normally fly out of TF Green, where the Patriots fly out of, I'm not using their vehicle in any way. I'm just saying. So we go there and we look at the space. We measure the space. We model it up in 2D and 3D. Then we go and we import that into our simulation environment. We go through the process of saying, hey, we're going to orient the equipment this way because we measure their size of equipment. We model that. And they're like, nope, the equipment must face this way. The equipment can't look like this. It has to do this, this, and this because of this law. And then we rearrange it and we come back. And a lot of it's this very much collaborative way of framing a problem.
Sure.
And making sure that what we're doing is also verified and validated. This is probably the part for industrial engineers. Well, you can't have a solution unless you do V&V. Well, that's probably the part that election officials are like, wait, I thought we already talked about this. Wait, what? But we walk them through the process and we explain to them why. And then they give their recommendations on what they can and cannot do, or they can't fit, or how it's presented. Or sometimes even, and this is, I know, this is difficult sometimes for engineers, based on the perception of what it looks like, not actual function.
Right.
So working with them on that. So that's one example of just a person who came up to us and they're like, you're those simulation people. You're the ones that show those really cool the graphics. And we're like, yeah. And that was awesome. And that collaboration has been extraordinarily fruitful. We are looking at working with them for 5 different projects. We've already finished one. We're, partially through for quite a few of them. And that's wonderful. Sometimes it's also just being assigned to sit at a certain table at a conference, and you're sitting there and you happen to be sitting next to the director of an exceptionally large county. And they're like, hey, I'm like, hey. And then nothing happens until towards the end of the day when we're all getting a little silly because conferences are long.
Sure.
All of us know that.
Sure.
We're like, oh, if we could just have a magic wand and we could fix this, this, and this, what would it be? So then we're like, well, da-da-da-da. And they're like, oh, wait, that's a challenge that you have right now? Yeah. Oh, I can help you with that. No. Yeah. And then, so sometimes it's me recognizing the things that they're saying is not necessarily a problem in the way that they're framing it, but in the way that maybe they're framing some of the potential solutions.
Okay.
So just being able to know what they're saying and translate it back to some of our work in engineering, and then trying to translate our work in engineering back to them. So a lot of it is on the fly, kind of just, a people kind of conversation. We are all humans. Engineers, we are humans. Election officials, they are humans. We're all trying to do a good job. We're all trying to help. Engineering, in a sense, is just applied mathematics and science. So we're out there doing it and we're having those conversations. So normally that's how it starts. It's very rare that somebody actually emails me through our internet website portal that says, hey, I need help with X. That has only happened successfully once. Other times is also just introductions, right? Where one county we've worked with time and time again, they were really happy. They don't need us anymore, which is great. But also, it's great to see them, right? They say, oh, I know that this county over here has a particular challenge. Can I introduce you?
Right. Okay.
So that's my very long answer to your short question.
No, but it sounds like they're trying to be good neighbors in that, if they fix it in one county, they're going to help another county fix it as well.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that doesn't get discussed is the election official community is small. They know each other. They know each other's challenges. They are communicating and they are friends and they are trying to figure it out. So what works in Colorado may not work in Georgia, but there may be a solution in Georgia that could help inform the future of what they choose to do in Colorado. As long as those lines of communication are open, and they are, and people are talking, and not necessarily that very specific one,
right,
which is a very good example. Everybody is working together and trying to figure it out in a collaborative way. And that's why we go to some of these forums. That's why we go and have these conversations at these conferences where the election officials are at and having those conversations. And it's great. And I think that's one of the things that we don't talk about enough is that they are all working together to solve their challenges. They just know all of their challenges are very different, but sometimes not necessarily, especially if you're in the same state. But yeah, they all work together. They try to figure it out. They share a lot of some of their challenges and how they've overcome them, even from buying some of those trackers that go in the bottom of a bin inside the optimal scanner to make sure you know where the scanner is at all times.
Right.
Those types of things.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions that kind of rooted out of that answer. One of which is you had talked about the community of election officials. There obviously has been, at least by reports, fluctuation in election volunteers, for example. I can say fully, my father is an election poll volunteer this year.
Tell him thank you for me.
I will. He's actually doing this for the first time.
Oh, I love that. Yay.
So I'm curious then, how often do you run into folks who maybe aren't as experienced as others from state to state, county to county, however you want to divide it?
Well, just like humans, we all have different experiences. We come with different varieties of knowledge. So we've run into the gambit, I guess I would answer. I think most states have a solid form of training either at the state level,
right? Like
Florida's state level training is known to be one of the top. And some of them are really good at the county level.
Right.
And that works really well. I think ultimately poll worker recruitment has always been a challenge. I think that there are challenges that my political science faculty colleagues could answer a lot better. But ultimately, from what they have explained to me, is that you have a larger proportion of the population that are older, and those tend to be the individuals who volunteer because they are retired or have more free time, those types of things. But at some point, they are not going to be able to continue to volunteer.
Right.
So anyone who is interested, anyone who is passionate about elections, the election process, go and volunteer.
Right.
Also, go and see your election facility. A lot of these places have tours in place. I just got a tour at Maricopa County in Arizona where you can go and get a tour and they can tell you everything that's going on. They walk you through the process physically as well as logically and explain to you, this is what happens in this room and this is what happens in this room and this is what we're tracking here. And this is our command center and all of the computers. This is each individual person who's in charge of a particular department. So they are opening up and sharing what they do because ultimately they are there for you and their communities and they're members of your communities. So poll worker training has always been a thing.
Right.
Poll worker recruitment has always been a thing. It is not necessarily in our wheelhouse per se. We have created training videos with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. We have worked with the commission to help understand how poll worker shortages influence the entire system, how a down or broken scanner in a particular system can be broken down. If you have an electric shortage for a few hours, how long is it going to take for the entire system to rebound? Those types of things.
Right.
We have helped with that. That is basically our training wheelhouse to date. But my team does have big ideas on how we can start to explain some of these ideas in more video form. How can we go out there and really start to communicate some of these process-oriented ideas of elections?
Well, and that answered the question I wanted to supplement, which is how do engineers help those who maybe have less experience?
Sure. So I'll first frame it by our interaction with poll workers is very limited.
Right.
Most of the time we are sitting in a corner doing time studies and just figuring out how long people are waiting in line, how long does it take to actually vote an RCV, so a ranked choice voting ballot, those types of things.
Right.
So no, most of the time the poll workers come up to us and they're like, are we going to get fired because of the numbers that you're doing?
Oh, no. Oh, it's terrible.
No, we're not. Well, is this person, because they're working faster than I am, going to get more pay? No, they're not. Like, we're not here for that. Right. Most of the time we found that if we enter an active in-person polling location, we introduce ourselves. They know who we are. They know what we're doing. We answer every question that they have, and the polls haven't even opened yet. There's no voter in the space.
Right.
And that way, that's been really helpful. Our first time we did it in Rhode Island in 2018, everybody was staring at us. We're like, no, we're Rhode Islanders. We promise.
Oh, no. So you were essentially the Bobs in Office Space. Everybody looked at you as like, oh, this is what's going to happen to us. They're here to, cut staff and, cut budget and chop us down. All that. So really what I think we've described here over many years now within the podcast to say, one of, if not the worst stereotype of an industrial or systems engineer,
exactly,
as somebody who's just coming to take somebody else's job. And that's,
exactly, or replace it with a robot or, this special software that can do all of, yes. So we have those stigmas associated with us for sure.
Gotcha.
And it's not different in elections. It's just explaining to them how it's not relevant.
Right. Gotcha.
And we work it through with them. And most of the time we end the day, we're exhausted. They're exhausted. We're all eating pizza. We're all just excited to be through it. And then you still got a few more hours on the back end to process and then going from there. So yeah, most of the interactions we have with poll workers are limited.
Okay.
And in terms of your question with respect to experience, it is mostly the election administrators.
Right.
And I think that the turnover rate being as high as it is right now is kind of scary for most people.
Sure.
But what I can tell you is it's no different than any other job anybody else has been in, right? Where you have some people who have been there for a really long time and should probably leave.
Mm-hmm.
Some people who have been there for a really long time. And oh my gosh, if they do leave, we are, without a paddle.
Right.
And the opposite where, this is a new person and they have no idea what they're doing, or this new person is re-energizing and has all of these amazing ideas and we can't wait to support them and be there for them.
Right.
And so it's no different from all of those experiences that we have outside of elections, inside of elections. Now, one thing I will tell you is that most of the election workers that are election administrators that we work with are either elected, appointed, promoted, or hired. So these are people who have a passion for elections. These are civil servants. These are people who want to be there, which is no different from the people who volunteer as poll workers in the first place. So there's a lot of commonalities. There's a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of excitement on what it means. Election day is a day to be enjoyed, to be happy to be an American who can go out there and say without fear and without judgment who you want. And that is amazing. And we are very privileged at the Engineering for Democracy Institute to work with these people. And everyone that we've ever worked with is of that ilk. And I am just privileged to work with them, and they're amazing, and I'm cheering them on every day.
My other follow-up question does actually lead into my one political question.
David, you promised.
No, well, I didn't promise. I sort of hinted this was coming. But anyway, Here's my framing of the question. You mentioned in the description of how when you're working on a project, you have basically parameters and obstacles. They're basically the voting machines have to face a certain way and those sort of things that are legal. They're laws that were set or established at various times. What other, if any, obstacles have you gotten from a political front? We talked offline a little bit about the election day itself, the panic of we've got to get this counted. We've got to get this number out because there's media, there's politicians themselves. In a year like this, there's the presidential candidates. There's all these people. And then, of course, there's the public. And the public who has had to endure campaign commercials and text and emails about donate to this and donate to that for seemingly forever. And a nonstop feeling. The most common comment I get about anybody I talk to about the election is just like, I just want this over. I just want it over. But the pressure's there. And it's not to say that you on election night are just, it's like, well, we're going to get this churned out. But there's a difference between what is public facing, what's told to the media, versus the processes that are actually happening in real time while those comments are being made. And sometimes there's a disconnect because, again, politics. Talk to me a little bit, if you can, about any of those sort of obstacles that have disrupted projects or I guess maybe outcomes even for counties that you've previously worked with.
So I'll speak to the ones, I'll do one negative and I'll do a positive if that works.
Cool, that works.
So one of the ones that I thought was based on a political outcome of a lot of legal ramifications from a swing state that in swing states, they are highly litigated, right? Everybody and anybody is trying to sue somebody for something. And especially in elections, very specifically.
Sure.
And so we were making recommendations that we saw from another county for vote by mail. And we're like, oh, well, this particular county only uses a particular color, pen, paper, zip ties, everything. It's just one color.
Right.
So any other color of anything else, even if it's a white sheet of paper and it's not green, it should not be in this space. Right?
Right.
So we were trying to do that in this other particular county. And the comment we got back was, we have laws here that I am only allowed to use black and blue.
Gotcha.
Well, we're like, well, you're not going to use black paper. That doesn't really work, especially if you only have black and blue pens.
Correct.
And so it was a particular boundary of what we thought, using color coding in engineering makes sense, especially in a manufacturing floor where certain spaces can only have certain activities. So therefore you can't have errors by picking the wrong color, anything.
Right.
Right. So that is not currently an option for that community right now. And that was a real doozy. It's like, okay, so the color coding bins you can do, but color coding the bins with pens, paper, et cetera, probably not an option.
Right.
And I know that seems silly from a very surface perspective, but when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of ballots and knowing where they are in certain processes, it gets huge, right?
Yeah.
And if they're all in the same kind of colored standards, you don't know where they are in the process. You don't know where your work in process is unless it's in a specific designated space. So that's where that conversation continued, right? Where we had to be creative in moving forward with that particular county.
Yeah.
And that's where we see various political action create laws that may or may not make sense, but require engineers to problem solve around it. That's the one that happened most recently. And it did require a belly laugh at one point. You're like, wait, what? You can't use red color pens? And they're like, we can't use red color pens, Gretchen. I'm like, huh. Now, that doesn't mean go out there and find all of the counties that you can't use red colored pens and then try to figure out which I'm talking about. Good luck. There is over 3,000 counties in the United States, and there is anywhere between 8,000 to 10,000 election jurisdictions, depending on the year and the maps. So, yeah, please don't do that.
Gotcha.
The positive one is what happened right here in Rhode Island. So one of the reasons that we got into this in the first place was that we had a new optical scanner. So that's basically our checkout. And we put the ballots in there and it comes with the flag, right? And it says, and it's check mark and thank you for voting, right?
Yeah.
Well, that particular object went from an older unit that didn't have the optical scanner kind of capabilities that took 2 seconds. And then this new one took 4 seconds per ballot to process. Those of us, the industrial engineers on the call, are like, yeah, that 2 seconds extrapolated over how many ballots, over how much of a turnout, that's not an insignificant amount of number if you are not able to balance the entire system.
Sure.
Well, the law at the time was you could only use one optical scanner per polling location. So if you had a high turnout location, it didn't matter. If you had a multilingual ballot that required a lot more pages or cards, if you will, of a ballot, it did not matter. What we were able to do was go out there, do data collection, simulate, and demonstrate how having that law of only allowing one optical scanner per location was not helpful to balancing the entire system based on the individual needs of the communities that they live in. So we were able to demonstrate that information to the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections worked with the Secretary of States and they worked with the Rhode Island General Assembly. And now the law says at least one. Yay! I mean, that was amazing. It was like, yes, we changed an equal sign to a greater than sign. And it seems insignificant, but it is not, because the implementation, as we all know, as industrial engineers, everything is in the implementation and the minutia of it.
Right.
So getting that constraint lifted has been really helpful, especially for those communities who need that second optical scanner. And it doesn't mean one scanner is worse than the other or vice versa. It just means with the volume of people, the volume of ballot cards that need to go in there, what it looks like is a whole nother story, but the fact that it works and it gets them checked out in a reasonable time and they don't have to wait in line to vote after they've already voted, which is kind of a thing in and of itself. So those are my two experiences with the political side of it. Most of the time, you have election administrators who just want to do a good job. And if it is the choice between fast, cheap, and accurate, they're going to choose accurate every time. So what are the other options? Well, fast. Well, that's going to be expensive and not everybody has that budget. And then the challenge with that is HAVA funds go to the states, not necessarily the counties. So the counties have to vie for state funds. So that's a whole nother different challenge. And local election officials can explain that a lot better, right? So what does that look like for them? They just are trying to do a really good job with less. And that kind of constraint for us as industrial engineers is a perfect place to live. How can we do better, faster, cheaper, more accurate, potentially even more sustainable? How can we do that? Yes. So that's why we're in this space. And there's always a new challenge. There's always new math. It's not boring.
It doesn't sound boring at all. Believe me, it doesn't at all. I mean,
well, then I'm doing my job and being persuasive.
Well, you are. No, absolutely. And the reality of it is because of the legal challenges or the legal obstacles that are there. I mean, I imagine your team probably walks into a situation where it's just, here's the list of parameters.
Yes.
This has to be done.
Yes.
Where else can we improve? And then that's where you have to supply the answer somehow.
Yes. And that's where we do a lot of the we in the team to help answer some of those questions, because it is not necessarily going to be a solution that I see or my staff is going to see, but it could be a brand new undergraduate who's like, yes, actually, I just voted for the first time and here's what I saw.
Sure.
Sometimes it is, oh, holy smokes, I have this entire question. I just worked on it for 2 weeks. This one constraint changes the entire problem. I can't do a multi-integer nonlinear program on this. No, I probably need a stochastic search. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I just wasted those 2 weeks because of that whole other constraint that I might or might not have known about. And now I got to change the entire algorithm and my approach. Great. All right, let's go.
Right.
So it's those different types of things that have been really amazing. That's why I love to work with students. I love working with my team and they see the different perspectives. And then also working with our collaborators all across the country, different universities, different majors, computer scientists, political scientists, architects, architectural engineers, psychologists. It's fascinating because sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know how to problem solve this particular one. I know how to frame it, but I might not be the person who knows the correct method to solve it. So let's work together and do that. And it's been really a lot of fun. I've met a lot of different people that I would have never thought that I would met before.
I want to take a quick step back into history. In 2020, we had a global pandemic, and that will never, ever be forgotten.
To all of our dismay, right?
Right, exactly. Yes.
Coming up.
Very, very much. Some post-traumatic stress for some people, I'm sure.
100%.
But there was a surprising record turnout in various spots around the country, including here in Georgia, where IISE is based. And that actually seems to be an issue, or rather a series of records that may be broken again this time around.
Mm-hmm.
What are the commonalities you've observed from what happened 4 years ago, or what sort of problems you had to solve 4 years ago versus now? And then what sort of improvements did you discover in 2020, 2022 that you're continuing to either see a place for, or just have sort of always in the back of your mind? If there's anywhere where it's like the same problem's coming up at these different counties or in these different precincts, let's apply this.
Yeah. So I will take that in a few parts.
Sure.
So the 2020, the main thing that we were working on at that point was healthcare and layouts. What is a safe layout? How can we get people through the system effectively and efficiently and safely?
Mm-hmm.
And that was for a lot of in-person polling locations. So that's vote centers where you can go and vote anywhere as long as you're in your county, or a precinct-based model where you're assigned to go to the library that's across the street. Those different types of things. That's where we really were. That was kind of the crux of what we were doing. We made hundreds of diagrams all across the country. And that was really fascinating to recognize that a cafeteria is called a cafeteria or a cafetorium or all the variation combinations, but that doesn't mean that they're the same size.
Right.
Right. So what does that look like? Also, we got into some really interesting challenges of the minimum size allowed for a polling location.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have 6 feet social distancing, we know that I am not a dot. So I have width, and therefore the person next to me also has width. So we know that that's no longer entirely 6 feet.
All right.
So what does that look like when drawing it on a diagram? And when you have states that had very strict minimum sizes, and those minimum sizes would not actually be allowable for the healthcare constraint. That was really a fascinating problem to help solve. Based on the turnout in 2020, we saw that there was an additional bump in how many people voted by mail. And you do have states like Utah, like Colorado, like Washington, who have been doing vote by mail for over a decade. Right. But then you have a lot of other spaces where they might have had a smaller vote by mail system, and then it had to expand rather quickly.
Sure.
And being able to know how long it would actually take became a challenge, which is what we saw on election night in 2020. Oh, I won't be done today, but I'll be done tomorrow. They come out the next day. I won't be done today. I'll be done tomorrow. And it's not because they're not working. It's not because they're not doing the work and they're not making it count. They just hadn't had that amount of returns in that style.
So the expectation just wasn't there. They didn't realize how many they were going to have to deal with. Therefore, right. Their outcome, whatever they had predicted going into the night, radically altered, yes. And they had to adjust.
Vastly, right? So one of the things that we have learned since then is that when you do have a high vote by mail portion of your electorate, those of you who have a vote by mail, turn it in early. Those of you have literally turned in hundreds of thousands of ballots the day before election day or on election day. That's going to take a lot of time. So if you have it, it's great. Right. Thank you so much for voting, but return it sooner rather than later. That would be really helpful. That's one of the things that we learned, right? Is that idea that we can hold on to it and then submit it on election day just makes it so that that return on the other side takes a long time. So that kind of process we were recognizing in some of the outcome patterns in 2020. So then we started looking at vote by mail in 2021, did some preliminary research in 2022, And then we've been kind of doing that ever since. And what we're noticing is there's a lot of manufacturing types of questions, such that, do I use a machine to open up the ballot? Do I have humans to open up the ballot? Do I have or the envelope, not the ballot. The ballot's already in there. It's in an envelope. You have places that have secrecy envelopes. You have double roll secrecy envelopes. So sometimes you have 2, 3 envelopes. They all have to be opened. They all have to be, handled correctly and effectively. That all takes time. Oh, do I get a machine to flatten the ballot? Or do I have a human flatten the ballot?
Right.
Or, you know what? I don't know if I should include the instructions back in my vote by mail ballot. So I'm just going to put the instructions back in. Well, then that means you have a human who's on the other side saying, I don't need this. Thank you very much. And they deal with that and they take that out of it so it doesn't get processed in any way and hopefully recycled. But the point is that all takes time. And one of the things that we noticed is that when there were all these laws, for whatever reason, in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, even up until now, thank you, Georgia. Just going to call you all out on that. And you're not the only one, but the one that I feel comfortable calling out right now.
We're the most popular one. We'll put it that way.
It happens to be that way with the way the things are happening at the moment. But ultimately, this idea that you have early voting, which is setting up polling locations earlier. And then depending on what state, anybody can go to some of those until a certain time where you can no longer go to those on election day, right? Then you have to go to the one that you're assigned. Or you have other states where I could still go to anywhere I want, right? And there's those kinds of challenges, right? Where you talk to your family who lives in a different state and they're like, oh, we don't have that problem. Or, oh my gosh, I have this. And it's the differences, right? Sure. And that's part of the fun of living in the United States with 50 different states with all different styles of doing things. But that's early voting. So that's still more places that are opening up before Election Day and that require people, election workers or poll workers. You have the systems that need to be set up earlier. You have, if the election officials are paying for that space to be open or it's gifted. One of the reasons that you have schools that shut down on Election Day is so that those can be used for free because most of them, especially the public schools, are government, right? So they can be used. But if you have other ones, that doesn't mean that they aren't going to get compensated sometimes to be open. And if they're open longer, then that's another financial challenge. So that's one way. Then you have Election Day, which we're all super familiar with. We have the vote by mail process, which sometimes, depending on how you count, after it gets received either through a drop box or through the mail or through where you go to a vote center or early voting center and you put it in those particular other types of ballot drop boxes, also called ballot drop boxes. Then you have somebody who has to take it, scan it, check your signature. If you're in the 30 states that check signatures, then they go through that entire process for signature verification, what that looks like. Then you have to open up the envelope. If you have more than one envelope, you have to open up more. And then you have to take the ballot out. Then you have to flatten the ballot. And then you have to take that ballot and you have to then scan that ballot, so tabulate it. And then if there's any issue on your ballot, I was at one place for adjudication and the ballot was literally signed by a voter that said, if you have any trouble with my ballot, please call me. Here's my phone number. Because they filled in the bubble and then they crossed out the filled out bubble and then they circled in another bubble and then they circled the other bubble and it became a whole thing. Right. So yes, adjudication is a process where in certain states where they are voter intent states, they go and they get called or they actually have an adjudication team. Well, in that particular stance, that voter got called. This is a very rare occurrence. But for those states that do have those voter intent laws, they have an entire board that sits there and then has discussions and bipartisan board, not nonpartisan, excuse me, a bipartisan board who then goes and evaluates what they think that voter meant.
Gotcha.
That process alone is an oversimplification of, potentially, depending on how a county breaks it up, anywhere between 10 to 13, maybe 14 different processing steps. It's a manufacturing plant, not manufacturing ballots. Let me be very clear, but the processing of it, right? So if you have states or locations counties really, who return it, the ballot in this vote by mail way. And you have states that can't open them until election day, or they can't start tabulation until election day. There's a lot of different challenges associated with it. And that's what takes a long time. So to almost your earlier question with the media, and it's like, oh, and the polls close, and then blah, 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 state wins, blah, 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 state. And at the bottom, it's like normally in gray, and it's really small and italicized, and it says 0% of the voter is in. That's associated with historical patterns for that location. That doesn't necessarily mean there's no ballots that have been returned. They don't actually know. So that's where some of the challenges come in. Different states with their different processes and what they can and cannot do at certain times and what that looks like. And if there's an issue that you have or a question that you have on when your state can process, what it looks like, how potentially long is it going to take for my state to certify the election, which is a whole nother part of the process that we normally don't think about nor talk about, right? That gives each state a specified or non-specified time to make sure that they tabulate it accurately, where they say, you know what, as a part of this state, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, there is no specified time that says we must be done by this. But you have other states like Wisconsin who says, you know what, you started tabulation, you're not allowed to stop until you finish.
Gotcha.
And there's other states that say, you know what, as long as it's done within 17 days, we'll be fine with that. And then once you're done, then we'll go through the whole process, and then we'll go through and certify the election. And then that will go up to the Secretary of State's office, and they'll go through their process and they'll certify their election. And then they'll have their electors, and then they'll be sent and they'll go and be a part of the Electoral College. So it's those parts of processes, right? And as industrial engineers, we know that systems of systems are complicated. We know that they take a longer period of time, and elections are no different. And what we saw in 2020 and 2022 is this idea that we have more options for submitting our ballot more than ever, which means that depending on the state, you have to do 3 things all simultaneously, and effectively and efficiently and accurately. But, please, maybe we'll get it done as fast as possible. But they all know that everybody wants the answer as fast as possible. But that's why on the bottom, you'll see certain colors of certain states change based on the proportion of population of votes that is in there. And then sometimes it'll swing one color or another color, depending on if it's in person or not, or vote by mail numbers come in. And that's just where, sometimes the media doesn't need to, share all of the answers at 0. Sometimes we can just be a little bit more patient. But honestly, we understand that those processes are going to take time.
Well, I can say for sure, as someone who used to work in media, that patience is not a virtue of mass media. If the issue is we need to keep everybody watching or paying attention to our website or our network, yeah, they're going to go ahead and do it that way. That's an unfortunate side effect. But I think what this does is it opens a lot of eyes for our listeners, who hopefully will be paying some level of attention on election night, as to knowing, okay, just because I see the CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or whomever has this result on screen, it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. It's not really showing the reality on the ground, so to speak.
Now that we have more options that capture a different set of individuals all across the country in different ways, different levels of access, different levels of accessibility in what that looks like. It's just going to take longer. We also have more voters than ever, and that's going to take longer.
Right.
And I think for those of you who are listening and you've lasted this long, you appreciate the process that takes time, right? And what that looks like and the quality of a process that takes time. And this is no different. And the processes are all there. The checks and balances in those processes are all there. There are reasons for them, and they worked before and they will work again. And honestly, they've gotten better since then. A lot of election officials have collaborated and created their own professional societies in their own ways. They are becoming more of a community together and working on their continuous improvement. So in very many ways, we're in a much better spot from a systems perspective in elections because of that.
Right.
And knowing that it's not necessarily their first time doing vote by mail or their first time doing early voting. We do have some states who are in that situation, or some counties, and that's fine. But you have all these other counties and members of the community in the election space that are helping them with that. And I think that that's really special and it's important. And we know that those types of collaborations in other communities, medical communities, other government communities, and a lot of the work that's going on in electric vehicles and those types of things, is really helpful to have those different types of insights from your neighbors. And I think that that's something that the professionalism of election officials is only going to help strengthen. And it's only going to make the parts of their process better through that continuous improvement.
Have you been inquired by anyone about elections outside of the U.S.?
Yes.
Can you say where? Okay. Do you have an interest yourself in pursuing that kind of work on elections outside the U.S.?
Yes, I do have an interest in pursuing that work. I don't think that right now, with the size of the team, that we have the capacity at this time to do it, but it doesn't mean that we're not interested. There's an entire community of election observers that are international that go and observe other elections all across the world. One of my longest and closest working colleagues, Dr. Bridget King at the University of Kentucky, has been doing that for years. And one of these days, she's going to get me to go to one of them. And it's just an amazing part of the process. It is a formalized process. There are different points of certification, knowledge to get certification to even go into certain countries. And it is a thing that we are open and willing to do. We're just trying to figure out what that means. The idea of understanding U.S. politics is its own particular type of interesting as an engineer, and that's no different internationally. So it would just be a different way of reframing the entire part of the problem. But honestly, the environment changes anyway. So it would just be what are the political ramifications or the geopolitical ramifications? Those add different layers to it that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, if I'm honest.
Last question. What happens with you and or your team election day, election night, the weeks after, getting past the election generally? What does that look like? What is that experience like for you? What is it that your team does, if anything, at that point? Give me a little idea of what the post-game election 2024 is for your group.
The elections group is a community that has created a rapid response team. And the Engineering for Democracy Institute is a member of that rapid response team, and we're going to go anywhere that they ask us to. And it's very much I don't actually need you to go here. I might need you to go here. Or I don't actually need you to go anywhere. I just think that this number in this particular space might be inaccurate. Can you double check if that's real based on their voter returns, based on this, and this? What does this look like before election day? And what could election day look like? So that happened in 2020. That's going to happen again in 2024. Where we're going to be is across the country. One group, we're still wavering on where exactly in New England they're going to be, but we know that they are willing and ready and able. Another part of us is going to be traveling across the country to California and Wisconsin. So there will be a team of us in Wisconsin on election day and doing time studies. Another section of our team is going to be in Colorado. So we had some great interactions with the Secretary of State's office of Colorado, and there's a few things that we're working on with them. So we're going to be out and about in that particular state as well. So as of right now, at least 4 different locations, maybe 5. But we'll be out there on election day. When it looks like after really all depends on how the election spans out. One of the groups in one of those spaces will be looking at vote by mail. So they're going to be there until the vote by mail is done. I haven't even bought their return tickets yet.
Oh.
So, because I don't know how long it's going to take. They don't know how long it's going to take. And I don't want to also have them ship out the next morning on an early morning flight if, they just went to bed at 1 a.m. So, we're trying to figure that part out. Vote by mail processes is fundamentally longer to observe than just day of elections, which was what we were very much used to in 2018 and 2020. And now in 2022 and 2024, it is a different ballgame entirely for that particular time commitment to doing that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, starting next week, I'm traveling for the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
Well, I hope for our listeners, this has been incredibly eye-opening. I certainly hope anyone who's going to be up late, maybe Tuesday night, November 5th, that is, if they're up as late as I am, I hope that you have a new perspective on how to look at what you're getting back on the television. So, or however you're choosing to follow the election results, which, by the way, may very well not happen that night. So
I would put a wager that it won't. But one of the things that we say in elections and elections research is high turnout, wide margins. And then as soon as we know what that looks like, then we can all go to sleep.
Well, I certainly hope you get your rest. Gretchen, thank you so much for talking with us. This has been incredibly insightful, and good luck on whatever you may end up doing in November and beyond.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to speak with you as always. And if anybody is interested in joining the team in terms of being an engineer out there who wants to do work in elections, please feel free to reach out. We are starting the STEM for Elections Network. It's where we are building a community of people who can help us all across the country and help us use our engineering tools to support election officials. So if it's something that's of interest, email me and we can work together on helping that in maybe areas of your own community.
Thank you for joining us for this special From the Archives edition of Problem Solved. Be sure to follow wherever you listen, and we'll see you next time.